to try to do that. But when it comes to the system, there are things that have been put in place that still have to be changed, that was put in place hundreds of years ago. So there is a difference. But when it comes to actually being against somebody just for the color of their skin, that is the difference. Just like Sarah here just said, like disliking somebody for the color of their skin or their nationality, ethnicity, whatever. That's where we come into the prejudice, stereotyping, and all that BS. So there is a difference. You have those people, then you have things in the system that we have to fix. So I'm glad that he preferenced that, and then I just wanted to delve into it a little bit more. You know what I'm saying? So let's get back to it.
People, let's be honest. As Black people, we don't have the institution, the wealth, the money, or the power
in the West.
In the West. Even in our continent. With all due respect, Ghana ain't owned by the Ghanaians. The Ghanaian airport is owned by a Turkish billionaire.
I was driving home from practice, about to be a free agent, hopefully signing another multi.
So we do not have the power to be racist. You may make a little joke about a white person.
When you said that, you saying you don't have the power to enforce
racism.
What do you mean by systematic racism?
Like, so not just systematic.
See right there when she said enforce it, that's where Sarah was trying to help correct her, because he's saying systematic. But people, this is the thing. What it really just it burns my biscuits, if you will. When people say that, they don't realize how to differentiate it. And then when you make such a large claim or stake in a claim like that, you have to be able to break it down, especially when you're on a platform. Pearl videos are getting hundreds of thousands of views. Her main channel has 500,000 subscribers. So when you have these conversations, you have to make sure you're educated on. If not, either say, I don't have all the facts I need to research, and just don't say nothing, or just don't say nothing in the first place. So I'm glad that Sarah is, actually getting on her about that. So now Pearl is asking the question about what do they mean about systematic. So let me rewind it back a little bit so y'all can hear the question.
Enforce racism.
What do you mean by systematic racism?
Like, so
not just systematic.
I'm just curious. Like, what institutions?
So institutions like the police force, right? The police force, people say, are institutionally racist. Over here in, I think it was 2007, we had a guy called Bernard Hogan Howe, who was like the head of the Metropolitan Police. And he was the head of it's like being the head of the police in America, right? And he said, well, if people say, our institution is institutionally racist, that's something we're gonna have to take on the chin, right? That's what he said as the head of the police. So he knew to some degree that his institution was racist. So institutional racism, I believe, actually exists, but individual, like, race prejudice also exists, and I think sometimes people get the two misconstrued.
And you can go as far as saying,
but one is more real than the other.
Have been historically
racist,
like redlining in America. Like that was an institutionally racist thing. Do you know what I mean? Like that.
So he's about to go into the redlining conversation, which is a great conversation to have if you're versed in it. But as far as what he said about the officer over there or the police chief, acknowledging it. But the thing is, let me break it down like this. What makes the oppression or racism different, right, is say if a person is just racist or prejudiced towards somebody because of their skin color. That just, that person being that way and being ignorant that way. But if they start working the police force or they politics, that's when you get into the system of how things are going, how laws are made, how laws are enforced. That's when it becomes a problem, because I remember a year or so ago when something came out with these officers. I believe it might have been in South Carolina or North Carolina. Don't quote me, but one of those places. And some of the conversations were released that these police officers were having behind the scenes and saying that they can't wait until there's a civil reaction towards the racists so that they can do something to Black people. That's what's the issue. So you actually have those guys being recorded and being played back to the community throughout the nation that there are police officers that are in these acts. And the main issues that I have with this, I'm sure a lot of people would agree. When you have partners that are doing this and you don't say nothing or do nothing about it, that's a problem. And then there are certain departments that things go on. You got the in LA, they had this police officer gang which came out, they arrested them, so I'm not making allegations. This was actually a thing in LA. They was called the executioners. They would rob, steal from the drug dealers, kill some of them, take their lives. And this is well documented. For anybody that want to look it up, you can look it up. The LA gang, LA police force gang, the executions, and so many people went to jail. So you have situations like that. So if people are able to do something within the system, that is a problem.
It's institutional racism. And I think people say, oh, that's racist. It's like, well, I say the way to attack racism would be institutionally. What are the institutions that enforce, like schools, or I don't know, education, where they're teaching, I don't know, a racist, I don't know, doctrine in school or something like that. I think
for those of us that don't know what redlining is, could you just explain that?
Okay, so redlining was where if you wanted to buy a house, right, in America, certain banks would not give loans to black people, right? They would only give them to white people. So that, as the banking as an institution, became a racist institution because it was not giving loans to black businesses and to black people for them to become wealthy.
Yeah, to go into a bit more.
And when did that stop?
It stopped.
I don't think it stopped.
It did stop.
No, but technically it hasn't.
It has. That's one of the things where even I get looked at a bit wildly at. Like, institutional racism does exist in certain areas, but I think certain things are just they need to find because redlining doesn't happen anymore. It doesn't exist. It's literally
on paper.
Yeah, on paper. That's what I'm saying. So on paper. So institutionally, even that we have to find a new, like, covert institution.
No, because I have a cousin who lives in America.
So South Africa was an institutionally racist state. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So institutional racism exists, but I think people need to differentiate between what is institutional racism and what is individual race prejudice.
So I'm just curious with the redlining thing, like what?
All right, so real quick on that, when they talk about the redlining, she asked when did it stop? On paper, it stopped, technically, right? So what Sarah was talking about is, with personal, like, individual oppression done into other people of color or, ethnicities or whatever. You have people that get some power and will say, I'm not going to deal with these people over here. So that's just being prejudiced because they this, they this, that. But when you're doing business publicly, that's stupid. To discriminate against somebody without factual knowledge, like, say, looking up police reports, looking up, whether they have felonies and things of that nature, right? Certain things that go against what you're trying to provide in a service. If you factually have claims or showing that you don't want to deal with this person to hire them at the job because they're a felon. Say if you have a bank or you're a bank manager and this person has a felony on their, on their record that showed last time they worked around money, they stole money or they swindled money, whatever you want to call it. That makes sense to not hire them in that situation. But then you can have some people that can have properties and they won't rent to somebody that's Asian or somebody that's, Black American, you know what I'm saying? Like, that is where it's an issue at. Doesn't mean it's necessarily allowed in the system, but we have to still be careful about the undertones of that oppression and what's going on and things that we have to deal with. I mean, even with certain situations with the farmers, people that, black people that have farmed, they said that it was around 40, from what I remember, it was something that said 47% of black farmers were discriminated against. And they wasn't able to get the agriculture benefits and things of that nature. So that's a pretty big number. That's almost 50%. That's almost half. That's almost 5 out of 10 people. So that means that fifth person almost didn't get cleared to get those benefits. So 4.5 out of 10 people, or what do you say, 100, is a problem. I mean, that is seriously a problem.
What happened? So they found that, like, they were lending at different rates.
So,
or what
basically, to go into a little bit more information. So to put it in a context of this room, what they would do is they would say, the good banks would say, I'm gonna give a loan, but only to people who live, draw a line right through us, over on that side, right? Knowing full well that they put all the black people post-slavery in a certain area. And then
SeatGeek presents Boomstick Lady.
Line of where they would give loans to if you lived there.
Right.
If you lived in the hood, you couldn't get a loan because you lived in the hood.
Right.
But the thing is, it was like a chicken meets egg situation because it's like you put them there.
All right, I want to back up just a little bit where he said something.
Loans to if
the
you lived
hoods.
there. Right. Through us, over on that side. What they would do is they would say, the good banks would say,
happened. So they found that.
All right, so he's going to talk about with ending of slavery and what happened to our communities. I want to highlight something.
Like they were lending at different rates, or what was
basically
it?
To go into more a little bit more information. So to put it in a context of this room, what they would do is they would say, the good banks would say, I'm gonna give a loan, but only to people who live, draw a line right through us, over on that side, right? Knowing full well that they put all the black people post-slavery in a certain area, and then cutting off the line of where they would give loans to if you lived there.
Right.
If you lived in the hood, you couldn't get a loan because you lived in the hood.
Right.
But the thing is, it was like a chicken meets egg situation because it's like you put them there forcefully, post whatever, and then after you put them there with no actual other way to go, they can get loans to go live in the middle class areas or the high class areas.
I thought that.
Okay, so before she actually says anything, I wanna highlight that. So he was talking about post-slavery, and for anybody that doesn't know, post-slavery, once everything going to be abolitionists and all that fighting and everything. So post-slavery, which is also when the police force started around that time. So they would keep you in certain areas. They made certain laws where, like with the loitering and all that, like they would arrest slaves for that. If you didn't have a job, they would arrest you. Like they would come up with horrendous laws that only they would do to black people, slaves. So when it came time to where only sections or areas we could be in, I mean, even with, if you look at the story of Rosewood, before actually when it came to Tulsa, Oklahoma, which they're gonna bring up as well, certain areas we had to migrate to, but we actually were doing very well in those areas. So all of this that he's talking about when it comes to redlining, that ended up moving up, like I would say another 50 years or so, around the early 1900s or whatever. So as we were building, having our own communities, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Rosewood, all of that here in Florida, we were actually thriving and doing pretty well. It's just that certain cities, and I may have to do a video on this, and he's going to bring this up as well, certain cities that got destroyed by, racist whites and the KKK and all of that stuff, those situations kind of ended up messing us up to where it became a redlining. So even as we move forward and cities were still doing good, they would look at these black populated cities as places that are red line to stay away from, to keep us away from them while they was doing good, but we was doing good and thriving in our own areas. You know what I mean? So that's kind of what he's speaking on. I'm gonna let him speak a little bit more, but that's kind of the gist of what the start of what happened with redliners and how we ended up in those communities, like he said, where we was forced into those certain situations because we couldn't be around them. So I'm gonna let him go ahead, talk a little bit more.
This was in like the 60s.
Yeah.
So that was like a long time after slavery, so they could have.
And then after you put them there with no actual other way to go, they can get loans to go live in the middle class areas or the high class areas.
I thought this was in like the 60s.
Yeah.
So that was like a long time after.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is where she's wrong. Redlining is not something that started in the 60s. That was before that. Like the stuff that they're talking about, that was before that, where we could not go in those areas and things of that nature. So it's always been redlining, where we could not go out of our own comfort zone. The difference came when they really put it in effect. It's about businesses and things of that nature, but it was before the 60s. So that's why it's kind of like you shouldn't really speak on something you don't know.
Slavery, so they could have moved. No,
I mean, but you have to also take.
No, this was in like the 60s.
Yeah.
So that was like a long time after slavery, so they could have moved. No.
I mean,
No,
yeah, but like,
no.
This is what she shows her ignorance. She doesn't understand or know or did the knowledge of when redlining really took place, especially post-slavery. Then she's saying this was the 60s, which she is wrong. And then she's saying they could have just moved. But mind you, we're talking about an era where they were very prejudiced against black people just for being black. Not what you show you can provide as a person, but just against it.
yeah, but you have to also take.
No, I mean, like, because there was mass migration. I don't know, like, there was mass migrations in the U.S. from the south to the north.
It was.
Yes.
And so you can't say no because a lot of them did.
But it became it was more of a thing where it was,
so she's talking about the Great Migration, which happened after slavery, right? That does not mean when those people moved to the north, they was not still going through racist situations. I mean, like, as much as people think that places up north, whether it's Philly or Pennsylvania or Connecticut and all these places, New Hampshire, those places were still treating people like that. Even when you go to Canada at that time, where black people migrated to Canada, there are still situations. They have documentaries about as well. I had the book Up From Slavery by Booker T. Washington, and he documents and talking about being in Canada and the people that he knew in Canada going through the things that they went through and being an abolitionist and trying to fight against those things. But black people were still going through those things everywhere they migrated. California, wherever you can think of, they still were going through that, because if they weren't going through that, there would have been no need for the Black Panthers in California.
it was if I was to think politically, it was an attack the mindset type of thing, where if you know how some people, like, once they're in the hood, that's just their mindset, right?
And with all
some people eat, sleep, breathe the hood. It doesn't matter where.
And they want to live there for the rest of their. They've grown comfortable. That's where they feel safe now.
Because in my head, like, why would you lend to people that live in the hood? More,
yeah.
Like, I'm not.
Why not?
Because usually, like, I'd imagine, like, in poor communities, they're not as good at paying back money.
Yeah, but imagine more of creating a hood to then say, why would I give people in a hood money?
You know, Tulsa. You know the neighborhood.
He'll be back in a second, y'all. I don't know what the fuck he doing.
My apologies. My apologies. Stay your ass background. My bad. All right, thank you. Appreciate y'all. Shout out to the chat real quick. What up, Wiley? What's good, Tampa Supreme? What's good, Red Illusion? Appreciate y'all. My apologies. But what he said was, fuck you. Anyways, what he said was some true shit. Real quick, my bad. I gotta recap it. I didn't even realize I did a JVJ. So what happened? What happened? What she says, as far as the poverty, and the brother in the middle of the two young ladies right on the couch said, "How do you make the hood and tell people you're not gonna help people in the hood?" So when the projects came, actually it was started at the time where there were military base, and it was kind of like a place for families to stay around the World War II. People migrated. They had a great white migration or whatever, saying around 40s to the 60s or whatever. They got away from black people, started building their own subdivisions and all of that areas. So they didn't take care of those other areas that black people were in. So that's why they started going down, because they trusted in those people to keep those places up. So my bad about that, y'all. Let me get back to the video.
Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Tulsa,
Black Wall
Oklahoma.
Street.
Yes, Black Wall Street. I'm sure, Pearl, you've heard about it. Obviously, you're from Black Wall Street.
No, I don't know what that is.
See, this I gotta get on her about. I'm sorry, real quick, y'all. I gotta get on her about it. So if you're gonna have conversations about men, right? And then when certain questions are asked, that's just like when they asked her, somebody asked her about George Clooney. She's like, I don't know who that is. I don't watch much TV, but you know who Leonardo DiCaprio is. So it's like another thing. Why speak on something you don't know about. Red Illusion said, what about trailer parks? Trailer parks too. But why speak on something if you don't know it? So now they're trying to educate her on something. And sadly enough, in my opinion, all the pushback she started giving, she should have been more leaning towards trying to learn instead of just run her mouth.
Okay, so Black Wall Street was a place in America after slavery where black millionaires existed. There were loads of black millionaires. There were, business owners. They had their own like black economy.
Where was that at?
It was in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, yeah.
So in Tulsa, Oklahoma, there was this huge town. Like black people owned their own planes. They had their own businesses. They were like multi-millionaires. They do stock market, all this kind of stuff. And then what happened was the KKK and like other groups literally burnt the town to the ground, bombed it from the army, bombed it from the sky, just totally got rid of that town, like killed everybody in the town. I don't know if you've seen Mississippi Burning, that film called Mississippi Burning. Similar to that. So yeah.
Is this something to do with redlining?
No, I don't know.
Okay.
I'm just answering the question.
No, I'm getting there because the redlining came shortly after that. If you actually look at it came after that. After they burned down this black economy, redlining came in.
Where was redlining at? Like what cities?
It's all over America.
Countrywide. It was like a 50-state thing where
we have gone off topic, but
we have. No, I just genuinely I don't know a lot about it.
But yeah, essentially it was a thing where state by state it was statewide. So it was a thing where at the time it just seemed like it was just the right thing to do, but when we look at it, like that's fucked up. And the reason like a lot of the hoods that exist today where they are is because those are the places where the red line put.
And also, real quick, when it comes to Tulsa, Oklahoma, the crazy thing about it, like I said, everybody thriving, everybody making money, doing their own thing. Another thing that happened around that time, they were actually trying to get not just permits, but get I forget what you call it, but something like permits with building railroads, because they was also going to try to have train stations to go to other black cities. So a certain situation happened. I forget the names, but it was a certain situation that happened that some white lady accused some guy of grape, GR, of grape, and a white mob wanted to come get the guy. She identified some guy. They arrested him. They came and got the guy, took his life, and then they went against. No, if I'm not mistaken, hold on, my bad, my apology. I believe the guy got out because they couldn't convict him, and then they still went and got him. Then they started going to war with the black community. People stood up. Don't get me wrong. Regardless of what some Cynthia G say, black people stood up. That's where the planes and dropping missiles and all of that stuff started happening, because they were standing up for themselves. They destroyed the town. They tried to rebuild it again. Then they destroyed it again. So just wanted to give a little bit of a backstory on that. We might have to do an actual documentary on that.
All those poor people.
Or video, I'm sorry.
Who had no money and no funds to get out of there. So their families have lived there for generations after generations.
Right, but that was like my dad was from the hood and he just like left.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what's stopping you from leaving?
The big thing about
that's the ignorant shit that certain white people do. And that's this disingenuous question. You see these people just sit here talk about post-slavery, building up to what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And then your question to come back is, your dad came from the hood because he was Irish. The hoods are different. Slums are different from different cultures. But your dad came from the hood, allegedly, and he just moved. You know what the difference was? In a situation, I forget what it was with the Irish communities. I believe it was either the fire station they dealt with or something like that. Hold on. What'd you say? Red Loser said he's completely lying. There weren't millionaires. It was like 5 small businesses. There wasn't even planes to bomb back then. It was a race. Actually, you might want to go back and do your history and research, Red Illusion. Go look it up while we talking. That's actually what happened. Now, I don't about all the millionaires. I don't know about all the millionaires, but it was more than 5 businesses, bro. It was, you had taxi cab companies, you had hospitals, you had banks, they was actually doing their own stock exchange and all of that. Like, actually go look it up, because you're looking real crazy right now. Like, actually look it up first. But back to what he was talking about when she said just move. Nah, it wasn't that simple. They gave you the breakdown of the slavery era. They gave you down with abolition era. They gave you all the breakdown, and she still said, why don't you just move? because you got to think at this time we're still talking about the mindset of those type of white people and the way they were. So it wasn't something that you could simply just up and move, especially as somebody is white. And at this time, they especially start assigning different nationalities, Italians, Irish, and all that as white, that they could say they were white. So it's a little different than you being white and moving somewhere else. This, I mean, it's more to break down about it, but I'm just puzzled by the way she's acting very disingenuous right now. So it's kind of making me look at her differently.
It's a little bit more.
I'm saying if you make like good choices and work hard, you can move out.
And it's not.
Y'all excuse me. Apparently they commercial happy on this episode. My apologies. Hold on. All right. I gotta go back. But I'm gonna run my mouth a little bit while we do this. So like I was saying, like the way she's acting very disingenuous right now it is bothersome to me, because I mean, come on, like I don't know how much more we're supposed to break down. And like I said, it's not for everybody. And I see people that are really, acting very ignorant to certain things. And it's really sad, man. It's really sad because we see it all the time. It's very sad. We see it all the time.
That white person.
Hold on, my apologies, y'all. Let me get it back to where it was at.
Similar to that. So yeah.
Is this something to do with redlining? Aside, I'm just trying to understand. I just meant today because I thought we were talking about today. Nothing stopping you from moving.
Okay, my apologies. Let me get it right back.
You can do it if you've got that mindset.
If
you got,
you can move out.
And it's not.
No, and that's what my dad was one of 13 kids. He like grew up on the south.
Okay.
But that was like my dad was from the hood and he just like left.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what's stopping you from leaving?
The big thing about
it's a little bit more.
I'm saying if you make like good choices and work hard.
All right, real quick, my boy JBJ just put this up here. Tulsa contained 108 Black-owned businesses, including 41 grocery and meat markets, 30 restaurants, 11 boarding and rooming houses, 9 billiard halls, and 5 hotels. Hopefully that answers your question, Red Luge. I can't believe you said 5 small business, but whatever.
Hard, you can move out.
And it's not.
No, and that's what my dad was one of 13 kids. He like grew up on the south side of Chicago in like a really bad area.
It's not always.
You can in 2022.
You can.
I don't disagree with you.
See, that's what I'm saying. That's where it's a problem at, right? She's saying he grew up on the south side of Chicago in a bad neighborhood. South side of Chicago, bad neighborhood. So let's say her dad was born in the 50s. In that time, it's still not going to be very simple for Black people just move up and go anywhere. This is where still redlining is still going on at this time. So they wasn't just going to be able to up and move. And this is where the ignorant comes. You're white. Not right, you're white. So you're not seeing the same thing that we're having these conversations about, that, this stems from slavery of foundational Black Americans. Since then, especially at this time. Now in 2022, I'm not just going to make that claim. I'm not just going to say it's just going to be easy for us to up and move and all that back then. No, but nowadays, it's like, what's stopping you? Get on your grind, get on your hustle, and not only that, you can go get you a lawyer. You see Benjamin Crump represent you and get you paid. He may not win every case, but he'll get you paid. So there's ways to do that, especially with social media, online presence, and things of that nature, calling the news, going live on Facebook or YouTube and all of that stuff. You can do all of that now and put somebody on blast if they trying to do those disrespectful things. So when I hear people that complain about certain things, and you be like, did you file a lawsuit? Did you do anything? It doesn't seem like, certain people do things and then they just complain about stuff. They're wrong for that. But what they're trying to tell her is simple. Back then, you knew what it was. This is so simple. And that's why I'm like, she's got to be acting ingenuous. Like, it's right there in front of your face.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with you either.
So I'm just
It's
confused.
easier said than done, but you can do it if you've got that mindset. If you've got that mindset, you can do it.
But you also have to take
no,
a lot of
it just
people
when you were talking, you were like, it just sounded like you're saying they're like put there, and I'm like, but anyone can move.
Yeah,
and even like throughout history, there's always been like mass migrations of like groups of people. Like for example, like if you go into certain communities in New York, like maybe at one point they were very Jewish dominated or Irish dominated, and you look over the course of history, they're not anymore because people move in like different.
Yeah.
So like now, if there's nothing stopping you from moving, like I don't. Yeah.
You don't see the reason.
But
like for
there are some
you can move anywhere.
things.
It's a
You can move
generational
anywhere.
mindset thing, which is why now we live in a time where more and more since about like what.
Well, I think it's like individual choices, right? Yeah.
But which is why we're seeing a lot of people like coming out of the hood, and there's all these movies coming out of the hood, blah blah blah. But like back in like when redlining was a real thing, there was literally you can't move anywhere because you didn't have the money for transport.
Oh no, I just meant today because I thought we were talking about Today, that's what I don't know. I'm not pretending to know about redlining. I'm just trying to understand what you're.
That's why I'm on your side here because that's why
I'm not on the side. I'm just trying to understand.
I mean, like in terms of like I don't when you're talking about institutional racism, and I said you have to also call it like one section covert and one section overt. Redlining doesn't exist on paper. No, it exists in theory. So it's a battle of the mind to get yourself out of there, because like Poe said, we live in a time where you can do whatever you want.
Oh, right. So it doesn't exist now.
It doesn't exist now.
Have you seen that thing where you've got like the little spider, and then they draw the line around the spider
and it won't go out.
It won't go out.
Wow. So can I just? I'm just curious. Why is the comments all saying it says the redlining was based? They don't give loans to poor people.
Yeah, that's what.
And who supports people? Who supports?
Well, it depends on the subset, because like if you look in the U.S., like different subsets of like there was a slave. I think it was the Caribbean. They outperformed white people in a lot of cases. So like there's certain subsets of black people that outperform white people, like Nigerian.
I mean, Nigerians in America,
even Indian Americans, they outperform everybody. So when you say like, oh, like who's poor, it could be like Irish had a lower GDP per capita.
A lot of the
at
time,
one point.
I actually think being poor is a mindset.
Yeah, 100%. I think a lot of the time.
All right, so back then in this situation, like I said, it was different areas. We can break this down. I can just speak on it briefly. So it was certain communities that certain things was given to. I think the Irish was given more of the police stations in New York back then at those times. I think Italians, fire station had control of those. Asians control the markets, things of that nature. And we had our own too as well. So I'm not just, trust me, I'm not saying against all odds we were not still thriving. But when you have those situations that you have to deal with when it's systematically problems, that's where I think we separate with certain people that has Pearl mindset on that. She keeps having the mindset, well, if I did it, you can do it too. You don't tell that to people that don't come from your same culture. That has nothing to do with you. And when she brings up Nigerians or Indian Americans, them people have their same problems. Like, when they bring up Asian Americans, when Asians out performing everybody, blah, blah, blah. Man, I'm seeing stuff on CNN where young Asian Americans are upset that they keep using them against us as black people or other races of people, saying, well, Asian people do this, they shut up and just take it. Them young Asian Americans nowadays, they ain't taking that shit no more. You're not gonna say, oh, they're good little Asians, they keep their head down, don't say nothing. They're getting tired of that shit. They're getting tired of that disrespect. And trust me, I totally get it. That's just like Nigerian Americans and things of that nature, or Jamaican Americans. They're getting tired of you putting us against each other. I'm seeing, and I'm happy to see this. I'm happy to see that they're calling people out. Even though I rock with Tariq Nasheed, and I know he rocks with other ethnicities of black people from different countries, and I get what he's saying, separation, foundational black, and what we need in our reparations. But I still respect certain other people that say, listen, I'm not with that bullshit either. All the Jamaican Americans that I know that I grew up with, they weren't with that bullshit either, bro. They was not with that bullshit. It was no separation in black, because they went through a lot of the same things that we was going through. But at this time, when they were coming over and migrating over after the slavery, post-slavery, and then you had the Honorable Marcus Garvey, may he rest in peace. he was pushing for that, us working together and then going back and taking our own land, our homeland back. You know what I'm saying? Unfortunately, it didn't work. We let too many entities come in and mess it up, and a lot of it we messed up ourselves. But at the same time, they were still going through it. We still had to thrive, and a lot of us still were sticking together, even still to this day. So they can bring up other races like that and try to put them against it and say we just crying. But when you really unpeel the layers, peel the layers back, and move the sheet out the way, and you can actually see the wizard behind the curtain, you'll see there's a lot more different. And certain people like that, I just don't have conversations with them. Just respectfully, if I have a conversation, was that I was sitting there, I would definitely check her, because I think a lot of the brothers and sisters that are trying not to go too hard on it. But I would have definitely checked her, and then I would have checked out of that conversation, because if you act like you're not getting it, then there's no need to talk to you about it.
Your surroundings. I think that a lot of people now have been so used to being poor that they get now growing up black, right, and growing up poor, because I grew up poor. You get told certain things when you're black and poor, right? You get fed a certain narrative when you're black and poor, and a lot of the time you believe it. And so your mind stays being black and poor. Oh my God, I can't do much. I'm not going to be able to do anything. This is going to be who I am for the rest of my life. And if you stay in that mindset, you actually will be.
You 100%.
No, that is true. That is true.
But to answer your question earlier, with the chat saying you can't make people, you have to also take into account the fact that businesses would also use redlining for hiring. So you can't even go to the job and say, I want a job here, because I'll ask where you live. I was
just gonna say that.
And then because if your house is past the redlining, they won't give you the job.
Won't give you the job.
So you can get the job.
And also, real quick, with that being said, they also did that with schools back then, of course. So that's where, in the 60s, they had to fight against that, the civil rights movement and things of that nature. But real quick, I want to go back to something what she said about why would they give poor people loans if poor people are not good at paying things back. The thing is, a lot of people, me and my brother Jay had talked about this a few nights ago. The people that were trying to go get loans were not poor people. Actually, in some situations, those black people were actually living pretty good. You can also, I got to do a whole video on this. You can also go back to, it's an article called The Color of Money, Pulitzer Prize winner, right? So at this time, they highlighted post-slavery and the redlining era and stuff like that, Jim Crow and all that stuff. They talk about this. So there were a lot of people that were going to banks that were not giving us loans, even when we had the credentials. So the redlining was actually some bull, because there was actually black people that actually had money, and they were just trying to, if it wasn't to start a business or invest more income into the business, getting loans for that, it was also for their homes. So with some people that couldn't even get loans to help expand their home and actually, feed the mortgage rate, like actually bring the mortgage on their house up, they were still redlining them. Now in this article, it was maybe a couple banks that actually was doing it, and they were working so good with those people in the community that was in that redlining. Those people actually, I think they got awards, or they got articles written about it, and they actually was doing good. And actually a lot of this actually, I believe, kept going to around the 70s, 80s or somewhere around that, because it also talks about it being things that was going on in Atlanta at the time. So it was going on for a long time. So yeah, I might actually do something on that. I may do it either here on the network, or I may go ahead and do it on my Out From the Norm channel. So I just wanted to speak on that. Yeah, it wasn't a bunch of poor people just saying, give me some money, I'll figure out something.
Job to move out. You can get the place you wanted to work in order to even save the money to move out, because redlining was a thing that was entrenched in all levels of government, right? At the time, right? From all the way down to the shopkeeper on a day-to-day basis to the senator at the top. Well,
so the reason I'm just asking, because I think she said like institutional racism, right? And so I was just curious because I'm Irish, and so a lot, like, they had a lot of similar, like, they would say like Irish need not apply when they first came, and they would live in a lot of the same communities.
No blacks, no Irish, no dogs.
Yeah, and so I was just curious what
I don't really understand all that.
Like, because Irish were indentured servants, and they actually had lower life expectancies than slaves because they were cheaper, so they would have to do a lot of the harder jobs, and they would like die quicker.
And in the UK, it's also because of the schism between Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland and the rest of England. So that is one of the reasons. So
And that's another thing I have a problem with. That was some victim Olympic shit. That was some victim Olympic shit because they're not talking about blacks versus Irish, blacks versus Asians, blacks versus whoever. They wasn't saying none of that. Blacks versus Italian. They was not talking about versus. They were just talking about the systematic racism and oppression that black people had to face during post-slavery, with redlining, with Jim Crow, all these things that we were facing. Then she jumped in and said, well, Irish, talking about her people, well, actually going through worse this, and it's like, see, that's where we have a problem at. And that's what I call people out on nowadays. Like, hold on. If you ask me a specific question and I'm telling you what's going on, then you bring your people into it and then start talking like your people went through more oppression than we did. That's the victim Olympics. That's the race you're trying to win. And that's the sad thing. Oh, I did it, so you should be, you still white, bro. And you're a white woman at that. So even though she's saying red pill stuff, all that feminist movement things that happen, guess what? It still benefits you. The fact that she's able to sit there and other women are able to sit there and talk in places that they say are supposed to be men's spaces and all of that, bruh. This situation is redundant. And like I said, certain people do that. And it's very ignorant. Real quick, let me go to the comments. So Jay said $1 circulated 36 times in the community and remained for as long as a year. The entire state of Oklahoma only had 2 airports. Black families in the Greenwood district own their own private planes. So Red says citation needed. The employers were mostly white due to the laws in the oil and travel industry at the time, according to the Oklahoma Commission report. Jay, get on that. He talking to you. All right, so let's go back to the video.
You know, when the England was invading and, you know, colonizing, and they had like I think it's Republic, Northern or Republic, one of the two. Yeah, there was a whole schism there. So they were like, all right, no Irish. So it was part of that too. So yeah, it has like a long.
Because I was thinking that the no Irish part was from the history.
Nah.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. But the no blacks, it's like these people are different. They're dirty. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of different. But
I was just wondering, because you said institutional racism, and so I was wondering, like, if it would be the same for people that were Irish and lived in those communities. I don't know.
There
wasn't an Irish equivalent of redlining.
Yeah,
okay.
Probably
that I know of. There might be from my history research, there wasn't an Irish equivalent of redlining.
The one thing I will add with that is when it came to redlining, when blacks did try to move into the neighborhoods, what they would do is they'd try and get a lawyer that was white to sign off on the deals. And then when they moved over and they saw for the final day's worth of paperwork, the real estate agent or whoever was selling the place would beg them not to move and give them every excuse in the book to ensure that they didn't move, on the basis that if that black person had moved into the neighborhood, the prices
of the houses
would go down in that area. So it was all like a business plot to say, like, if we allow a black person in the neighborhood,
the prices
it was from
And I'm so glad that brother brought that story up, because I believe that's also in the article of The Color of Money. The Color of Money article, if I'm not mistaken, also talks about that. And I seen a documentary that